The past 6 months have been very, very busy for me, creating one animated project after the next. But I'm here today because there's only one thing that I like doing more than creating animations: talking about animated films. And today, the film in question is the Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut Claymation musical video. I really didn't know what to name it. Created by yours truly. This was my big return, my coming back with a bang after such a long time, and I figured that my production experience making that animation would make for a great behind-the-scenes video. I've never done something like this before on this channel in relation to my stop-motion content, and I thought, why the hell not? Let us begin. Now, I decided to make this film coming out of about a 3-year break from animation. But once I decided to pursue animation full-time, that was when I decided, alright, what's gonna be my first project? And I was immediately drawn towards the Clay Fighter series. For those of you who don't know, my ties to the Clay Fighter community goes back quite a few years. Back in 2017, I had produced 2 stop-motion animated short films based on Clay Fighter 2. So yeah, I don't think I've done a Clay Fighter animation since 2017, which is pretty crazy. But that doesn't mean I haven't done anything Clay Fighter related at all. One of my fans/friends is the creator of the Ultra Clay Fighter Tournament Edition ROM hack, I believe it's called. It was featured on What Happened, and I actually designed and produced the clay models that were featured on the cover for the game. And other than that, I've just produced a few Clay Fighter figurines. Those were all little projects, but definitely far deviated from the claymation projects I've always wanted to do in relation to Clay Fighter. And that brings us to the subject of today's animation, the Sculptor's Cut musical. I'm not going to go into the details behind the history of the Clay Fighter series and the Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut release. If you want to learn about those, there is this wonderful video done by Rebel Taxi that you can watch. I want to focus purely on the idea that I had in getting this animation made. Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut has an animated musical sequence at the beginning of the game. The animation was clearly done with the in-game engine and sprites, and none of that looked good to begin with. So this was an animation that I always wanted to recreate, purely because of how much better I believed it could be if the right animation was put in place. So I began storyboarding it all right here on these sheets of paper. There is a lot for me to go off of here, and the general idea was already laid out for me. But at the same time, the original animation was so lacking that I just had endless opportunities to invent and add little things here and there just to fill in the gaps. Particularly in the final half of the song, there is just like, I believe 20 or 30 seconds of nothing happening whatsoever. And I thought to myself, there is so much that I can do here in terms of inventing and taking creative liberties. For this project, I had to make a total of 6 puppets from scratch, and it took me about 3 straight weeks to finish all of them. A lot of people ask me if they can purchase any of the stop-motion puppets that I create for my animation projects. And even though I would love to do that, if I were to sell anybody the stop-motion puppets, it would look like this. They go for $10,000 each, by the way. Keep in mind that these puppets are all made almost completely out of clay. Once I am finished with the project, the clay is all carefully peeled off and put towards the next project. This beautiful man here was once Ichabod Clay, and look at him now. This one's actually $15,000. I can hear you all typing in the comments, Lorenzo, what clay do you use? Well, type no longer and delete it because I use Van Aken Plastilina. Yeah, there we go. The only durable material on any puppets, at least for this project, are Dr. Killen's hands. I'm covering my face, so the autofocus doesn't get me. Dr. Killen's hands are not made out of clay. This is actually a moldable glue called Sugru. So I learned about this material from an old Pixar animator named Michael Parks. He has a YouTube channel, and he did a video talking about stop motion hands. Doing claymation on wire is hard enough, but doing clay hands on wire is almost always a bad idea. You just cannot move the fingers without the wire piercing out from the clay, without the hands getting mashed instantly. So Sugru is just such a great material because it looks just like clay and it is much more durable. You can bend it, you can flex it, and it doesn't fatigue right away. So if you don't want to make stop motion hands out of silicone, out of foam, out of latex, or any other more elaborate, time-consuming material, this is the next best thing. And in Dr. Killen's case, it worked out really well. Dr. Killen's gun is not made out of Sugru. I just didn't take this clay off yet. Oh, also Van Aken is a very oily clay, so my hands are getting dirty right now. I hate getting my hands dirty. And of course, once the pre-production was all done, it was time to get into production. As a matter of fact, let me show you something. Behold an island as you've never seen one. It looks beautiful. This was one of the first props or anything that I made from this whole animation, and I've grown quite attached to this island. I'm very, very sad that I can't keep it forever, but as you can see, if I flip it around, it is all just a facade. This is all old clay that I've been using for years, and I just put colorful clay right over it. This island has been sitting in my room for months now, and I haven't been able to take this apart without showing you first. Looking back, I should have put myself in the shot. I am going to miss this. And this is where things start to become complicated. After filming the island sequence, I had to make a big move getting all of my stuff into the studio. I was setting up in my studio for a good 3 solid days before I was even close to ready to filming. Compared to setting up, animation just feels like nothing, but setting up is just so grueling for me. But once I got to filming the interior shots of the castle, I just had so much fun putting in all these little Easter eggs and all these little jokes here and there just to give a little bit of life to the scene. However, one thing that I did not anticipate going into this project was just how difficult it would be keeping up with the tempo of the audio soundtrack. The opening sequence of the island and the title, that was the easiest part for me to follow because of how simple it was. But once I got into the interior shots of Dr. Killen and Houndgin, things just got really, really tight. Seconds count in animation. Every second is precious. But for this project in particular, milliseconds counted. Originally, I had filmed even more frames for Dr. Killen, but I had to very selectively delete frames from the end of Dr. Killen's animation and the intro of Houndgin's animation just so I could keep meeting all of the audio cues. And since I was deviating a little bit from the original animation at this point, I soon came to realize that I had much less wiggle room than I previously anticipated. So the whole sequence of Dr. Killen and Houndgin was very, very difficult to time, but I think that the end result was the best that I could possibly do with the amount of time that I was given. The shot with Lockjaw Pooch and Ichabod Clay and Bonker and Blob turned out to be way more difficult to film than anticipated because in the original animation, the room is really big and each sprite only occupies a little bit of space. But in here, in my small makeshift studio, the puppets were really big compared to the rest of the set. So I really had to create a lot of illusion just to fit all of the puppets in the shot without making the rest of the castle look very small. I'm quite pleased with the end result, although in the future I would probably make a paper or cardboard maquette of the set before I make the puppets and begin filming. Also, this brings me to one of my big blunders in designing the puppets for this animation, Lockjaw Pooch. Lockjaw Pooch is a Clay Fighter character that I have a love-hate relationship with, because even though I love his design and I think he's just a really fun character, he has one of the most impractically proportioned bodies ever. His head is so huge compared to the rest of his body that I was really concerned when making this puppet. This wire puppet has about 2 wires twisted together for the whole body. And as you can probably guess, 2 armature wires holding up this head was not nearly enough. And it wasn't just for this puppet. This goes for every puppet I made for this project. All through filming Lockjaw throughout this whole project, I was fighting trying to keep his head up, and every time I would move his head up, it would gradually go down little and little. It was terrible, but I managed to pull through. At one point, you can see that I tried to put Sugru around the neck as like a quick fix to like help buff it out, but at that point it was just too late, and I would have just had to make a whole new armature. Don't make my mistake. If you're gonna work with clay puppets, make sure that you're using way more than 2 wires. Clay is extremely heavy. So this didn't just create problems with Lockjaw Pooch, this created problems for Dr. Kiln. As you can see, I gave him a rigging point using a piece of brass tubing, but the puppet ended up being so heavy that my winder rig just wasn't even able to hold him up. Now, after filming that sequence, there was a short animation of Dr. Kiln doing a mwahaha kind of pose laugh thing. This was the only shot in the whole animation where I used myself as a reference. I actually just got in front of my phone and did a little goofy and then I just put it into my animation software, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna animate over this. Let's see what happens. And the end result looks pretty good, not gonna lie. Now, as mentioned before, the final half of the original animation is super barren. There is nothing happening. I knew that I wanted to add as much as possible with the time that I had left to work with. So I knew that I wanted to create a shot of Bonker, Icky, and Lockjaw terrorizing the island inhabitants. Originally, I was going to have human characters for them all to terrorize, but once again, the puppets were way too big for the set, so I had to improvise. And then, I had a stroke of genius. I thought, I'm gonna add in Claymates. It makes perfect sense. It just fit the screen so well. And I thought, okay, there's another Easter egg I could do. I also knew that I wanted to feature another hero character from the Clay Fighter series, so I thought that Taffy's windy, stretchy body would make for a perfect addition in swiftly wiping out the villainous Lockjaw, Bonker, and Icky. Once again, I wished I had more time to devote to this whole sequence, but this was another serious instance of a time crunch. I was just working so hard to keep it all within the cues and keeping up with the music. And originally, this sequence was actually going to be even shorter, because I was going to have a shot of Dr. Kiln looking outside his castle window. But after making a really tough call, I decided this shot has to be longer, and that shot with Dr. Kiln at the window has got to be scrapped. Just goes to show you, make sure that you're not going out of your way to film shots that won't make it in the animation. And now we go into one of my personal favorite shots in the whole animation. The shot of Bad Mr. Frosty's shadow peering up. I spent, I think, about 4 to 6 hours setting up this shot. I played around with different camera angles. Initially, I was going to have Dr. Kiln be framed from the center, but then I decided that the shot looked way too confined, it looked way too claustrophobic, so I decided to put Dr. Kiln into a third. I angled the camera, which opened up the set a lot more, which made it feel way bigger and gave it more breathing room. I remember when I was first buying materials for my studio, I had purchased a small jack that I found on Amazon for a few bucks. And I remember saying to myself, I was like, I don't know when I'm gonna need this, but I know I'm gonna need it. And this worked perfectly for this shot. I propped a little silhouette of Bad Mr. Frosty on that jack, and I was able to smoothly raise it along with the camera, and the end result looked super, super clean. However, one really big mistake that I made when setting up this shot was using a blue screen instead of a green screen out the window. Yeah, for some reason, it just didn't occur to me that using a blue screen in a shot that's bathed entirely by blue lighting, not a very good idea. So in Adobe Premiere, I was having a really tough time editing out the blue screen, and it was super arduous, and I wasted so much time. But had I made that little change, I would have saved myself a lot of time. And that leads us to our final Dr. Kiln shot, him getting thrown out of the castle. Not too much to talk about, I just made a miniature of Dr. Kiln and filmed him getting thrown out using a winder rig, which was edited out in post. It was actually the final shot that I did in my studio, so getting this shot done was oh so satisfying. And that brings us to the final shot of the project, Bad Mr. Frosty's special appearance. Bad Mr. Frosty doesn't interact with any of the characters in the original animation, but I knew that I just had to integrate him into my adaptation. Originally, I was going to have the shot pan up and have Bad Mr. Frosty already be in his final form. And I remember a couple nights before I filmed the shot, I was playing some Sculptor's Cut on my Nintendo 64 just for research purposes. No, it can't be played for fun. It's not a fun game. And I just remember seeing Bad Mr. Frosty's intro animation of him turning from a cute little snowman into his scary behemoth final form. And I thought to myself, there's gotta be a way that I can integrate this into the animation. And keep in mind that at this point, the opening musical sequence is finished. There's no more lyrics to keep up with. So all I had to do was edit in the title theme, and then I could just do whatever I wanted. So I've gotten a lot of people asking me how this was filmed. And honestly, it's not super complicated. You just have to be prepared to get a little messy. I started filming the shot panning up, then I proceeded to mash up his snowman form, spin him around. The second part that I filmed was his final form. I animated him doing his choreography and his line, the wink, closed it out, and then I very carefully reverted his position back to right about here. I filmed him getting mashed up bit by bit and spinning around, and then all I did was reverse the footage and use it to connect the first animation with the second animation, and the result just has him morph into his final form. Now, I did make a really dumb mistake with this shot. I meant to have him do a complete circle and then just gradually stop. But as you can see, he turns around back the way he came when he turns into his final form. That was a rookie mistake. I felt so stupid after I did that. I was like, oh, this could have looked so amazing, but it just, sometimes you have to cut your losses and move on. And that brings us to the conclusion of the production portion of this project. Needless to say, this was the most busy, workload-heavy, complicated animation that I had ever made. Ever. I was definitely optimistic when I set out to make it, and midway through, I truly realized what I had gotten myself into, but at that point, there was no going back. I was in my studio pretty much almost every day of that 3 weeks, and considering that I'm able to sleep where my studio is, it is, yeah, I just didn't leave that place for a while. But that's not even getting into some of the drama that took place while I was filming this animation. So keep in mind, I filmed this in a basement in the middle of the woods. And basements in the middle of the woods in the winter, they're prone to rodent infestations. So there were actually mice in the basement with me while I was working on it. So I was like Dr. Kiln, the mad scientist in the lab while I was filming this. And that's fairly benign, but the real kicker was the earthquake. So I live on the East Coast outside of New York. I'm in Connecticut, and I shit you not, an earthquake happened during production of this animation, which resulted in a pipe being burst in the basement where I was making the Clay Fighter musical. And I was like, you can't make this up. I wasn't in the basement while it happened. I was out doing something else. I said to myself, I was like, if there's a God, he doesn't want this animation to get made. He's trying to stop me. I'm gonna defy him, you know, for the sake of being a little bit dramatic. But yeah, I just thought like, wow, the universe doesn't want me to get this animation made. They're throwing earthquakes my way. Fortunately, nothing got damaged as a result of the pipe bursting in the basement in my studio, but I thought that was just, what are the odds? Astronomical, probably. But surprisingly, one of the most grueling and heart-wrenching part of making this film was the post-production. After making this animation, I set out to edit it in Adobe Premiere, and I was in for a rude awakening. I did not know quite how incapable my laptop would be at getting the job done. This is an old 2017 MacBook Pro. Running Adobe Premiere on my laptop was an absolute nightmare, and it just slowed down everything about the editing process. I was like genuinely sad. I'm like, oh, I can't get my animation I worked so hard to do together. I'm so sad, and woe is me. When I finally did finish the project, my computer would heat up so much while exporting it that the video file would come out horribly distorted, and it was so bad that I eventually had to just take the whole project out of my laptop and put it into my girlfriend's computer, because she had a much better computer than me at the time, and export it there. And I just remember saying to myself, Lorenzo, you are not starting another big project like this until you get a new computer. I've never talked about this before on YouTube, but way back in 2016, when I started doing claymation, my main goal was to learn something new and do something new, whether it be technically or in relation to the animation or any of that stuff. I wanted to implement something new that I've never used or done before into each animation project. And I see right now is an opportunity to do that again. Every single animation project that I've made so far this year has been an exercise in broadening my scope and my toolkit. I'm so excited to see what I can do next and how I can share it with you guys. Whenever people ask me about animation, they always ask, how do you have the patience for this? And when I'm working on a project every day, I think, there's nothing else in the world that I would rather be doing. But the funny thing is, whenever I'm done with a project, I always think to myself, man, how did I have the patience for that? I must have been crazy. I've done 2 big projects this year, the Clay Fighter animation and another one which I have releasing soon. And for both of them, I was very in the zone when making them, but once I wrapped up, I said to myself, God, I must have been crazy. I must have been out of my mind. This was a really stupid project to do. It was way more work than I anticipated, way more scope, way more production. My hardware was woefully unprepared to edit such a task. It was round-the-clock work for, I think, about a month and a half. It was grueling, and all for about 1 minute and 20 seconds of animation. Would I make this project all over again? I don't really know if I would have, but I did it. Even though the clay fighter community represents a very small spot of the internet, everyone who has seen the animation has just had nothing but nice things to say about it. And I feel that it's really tied me together to the community a whole lot more. And that is the most meaningful part for me. And I just can't wait to see what I make next.